Before I dwell into the details of my presentation, I would just like you to imagine a future where being a small business is no longer a disadvantage. A future where small businesses also have access to the same technology which we all know today that is one of the critical drivers on the success of some of the biggest corporations of our time. Over the next 10 minutes or so, as you guys go down that path of imagination, my goal is to try and convince you that William Gibson was right when he said that the future that I've asked you to imagine is already here. It's just not evenly distributed as yet. Over the past number of years, I have observed a very worrying trend in the neighborhood where I live, where a number of businesses like these ones were either shutting down or literally becoming hand-to-mouth businesses with no growth at all. So I thought this would be quite an interesting problem to try and kick around to see if there could be a solution for this. So I engaged a number of these business owners to try and understand why their businesses were not growing when the retail sector had experienced significant growth over the past decade or so. I found quite a number of reasons, but I'm only going to focus on two, which I think are the most critical ones. The first reason that I found was lack of digitization. It's still very common in most of these businesses to find people using notebooks to capture sales activities in their businesses. The more sophisticated ones would have a cash register, of which some of these cash registers are quite old school. So if you tried to run any form of analytics to understand the key drivers of your business, when you've got these tools to run your business, your chances of success are very low. The second issue for me is much more socioeconomic. Since the dawn of democracy, South Africa has experienced a significant growth of the middle class. People have become much more affording. They've become much more mobile. They can go anywhere to buy goods and services that they need. But that growth has also caught the attention of the biggest players in the retail sector. The top picture there is a petrol station in the middle of Soweto. When I grew up in the 80s, those guys, all that they did was to sell petrol. When you look at this picture now, one of the best retailers in South Africa has started to encroach that space. The bottom picture shows you a shopping mall, also in the middle of Soweto. This shopping mall never existed in the 80s. Now, if you are a small business that's been operating in this environment, and you haven't changed your strategy, you haven't found a way of reinventing yourself, your chances of success in this market are close to zero. So how do we solve this problem? The first step for us is to digitize all activity in these businesses. So we've gone and built a mobile app. So all activity in these businesses is captured on this app, and the data is pushed to a cloud database where we now have all activity of these businesses on a common database. But the key thing about the data that we are getting here is that it's also location-based. So, because we now have all activity of these businesses in the same database, and we know the location of these businesses, we then encourage business owners to form cooperatives. This then allows them that when they buy their inventory from the wholesalers or manufacturers, they should be able to buy in bulk, thus improving their bargaining power And all the benefits associated with economies of scale can then be achieved in the small businesses as well. The next thing that we are also trying to address here is optimizing the entire supply chain process. Today, it's very common that these business owners, when they want to buy their inventory, they need to make phone calls. And worst case, some of them need to drive to wherever the wholesaler or the manufacturer is to get their goods. So what we're doing here is that this platform that we've created allows for these small businesses, by a push of a button, to push their orders directly to the wholesalers and to the manufacturers. But we also believe that the value must also go to the wholesalers and manufacturers themselves. So if you think of a scenario where if I'm a wholesaler or a manufacturer, all of a sudden I've got a good grasp of how my products are performing in each of these small businesses. If I want to trigger any sales of products, I can publish specials on this platform, and in real time, those specials hit these small businesses and you can get almost immediate response. We also believe that we need to understand the buying patterns of consumers beyond the corner stores. So we want to understand what products are people buying, because people will continue to go to the big retailers to buy their products. So we're saying that we want to take all that market intelligence. So we've built an app where people can play around with their shopping list, and the intelligence that we get, we can then feed that to the small businesses so it can inform their product mix and also their pricing strategy. So how will success look like to us? So I did not mean to disrespect the Queen's language here, but the point that I'm trying to emphasize is that we would want to get to a point where all decisions in these businesses are data-driven. We want to get to a point where we can predict demand before it actually happens, so that people don't have their working capital tied on products that will not necessarily sell. We also want to take this initiative beyond the cornerstone. So we want to build ecosystems that revolve around the corner stores. In this picture here, you've got a farmer from north of Johannesburg, and then there's a lady who runs a business in Soweto as well. Today, the farmer takes his cattle to an abattoir, and then he sells the meat to the aggregator, who squeezes him down on price. And that aggregator sells to somebody else that ends up selling to this lady running a butchery in Soweto. So we want this platform to connect these two players so that you'd remove all the inefficiencies that can be associated with all the other players that do not necessarily add any value. Success factors for us. So smartphones are key, but we're not worried because the price is actually going down. We're also looking at partnerships. We need to create value for the manufacturers and wholesalers so that they can be part of this platform. But we also need to be able to engage with the business associations because they have access to all the players in this market. Payments for us is something that's key. We don't want the payment process to take 2 days before the funds can move from account A to account B. We want to be able to integrate with some of the creative ideas that the MasterCards of this world are playing around with and integrate them into our platform. Now, you're probably wondering why I am so excited about this project. Well, Anthony told you earlier this morning that South Africa, the unemployment rate is just under 25%. If you're looking at the youth, that number shoots up to over 40%. So what O'Reilly is saying to us here as South Africans, what he's saying to us as Africans, Europeans, Americans, Latin Americans, and Asians is that we need to go back to the communities in which we live or grew up and start to build businesses that will allow other businesses to grow and therefore participate in the country's economy. And ladies and gentlemen, that's exactly what we're going to do. I thank you.
Good evening. I'm very excited to comment on these two papers. When I was invited, I thought, well, what do I know about retail stores? So it turns out we've been recently working in Chiapas at CID. And we've been doing in particular some productive dialogue pilots in indigenous poor communities of Chiapas that are somehow close to markets. And one of the few businesses that survives in these indigenous communities in Chiapas every now and then, and you get to see, is a store. So there's a small store with a lady inside, so we went there, interviewed them all, spent there 2 weeks, and then came back. So what we found out is that, well, they don't know anything about inventories. They don't know anything about distribution channels, so they just sell to whoever is around. They don't know how to reach to larger markets. They have no idea how to deal with suppliers, so basically they buy whenever the suppliers stop by, if they think they need, otherwise they let them go. And then when I came back and I presented this to Ricardo with all pictures and the diagrams, I remember him saying, well, we just found out that these people is exactly like us. Because we work here in Harvard, and we have no idea how Harvard sells their products. We have no idea on retail. How do they buy the desks, the classrooms? How do they put the whole thing up? How do they sell? No idea on inventories, if anything. So basically, it's exactly like them. We just know one thing, but we can function here as opposed to them because there's an organization that put together all this knowledge, so we don't need to know that to function. And I found, and we found that's the key difference that differentiates that as opposed to us. We know one thing, but we have people around us that know what we don't know. When I was reading these two proposals today, and that's the reason that I requested to have them together so I could comment on both, I was thinking precisely in this, because both proposals lack this approach that if this goes ahead, and we all care about inclusive growth, if we succeed, most of these stores are going to shut down. Like, I'm from Venezuela, which is a country that has been burned down to ashes. 70% of the market is handled by small stores. And Marcela is from Bolivia. 65% of the market is handled by small stores. Brazil, between 40 or 60, but Chile, 20. So we do know that if we, as people that care about inclusive growth, we succeed, these stores are going to shut down. And then the questions that I want to pose to the both presenters, winners of our case study contest, is I would evaluate these initiatives to the extent that they prepare these people to jump up to the next level, as opposed to helping them to survive with a business model that we know is inefficient, but it's necessary. Like Marcela was saying, we all want a business in the corner. It's not so much about convenience, it's about cash. When you read about this, what you find out is that when the frequency of salary is lower, you cannot do what most of us do, which is going to the supermarket once every 15 days. So we have our credit card, we put it there, we make this big shop, we go home. But if you have daily salaries, then you cannot afford to make a daily travel. And because of your lack of liquidity, you need to do these small buys, purchases, like the guy that sells you the cigarettes differentiated, which is a classic of these small towns. Well, that guy is breaking down that package and selling it to you. You don't have liquidity. So I was wondering as I was reading this, and it's the first time that I got to read about this in depth, shouldn't we be working on the other end? Like, these stores exist, and they will remain to exist for a while. These stores exist because there's a lack of liquidity on the other end. There's a lack of formal jobs and access to financial markets. So if we address that problem, which is the problem that actually makes necessary these small stores that are inefficient, then in that way we might be solving the problem in a different manner. So I just wanted to invite both of the winners to think about this and see what you come up with. Now the Busi case, I really like this idea. This is one of the ideas that we had in Chiapas. Is there any way we can consolidate this? Is there any way we can create a platform where we put together all these people so they have bigger orders, so they have some negotiating power, so some margin is squeezed out of the wholesaler or the manufacturing to that end. And so I find that to be a beautiful idea, and I think it's an idea that can be part of a productivity gradually improvement so that these businesses are less efficient. And I also find in this idea some merit to the extent that they prepare these people to jump up to the next stage. So what's the next stage? Well, we're not going to have Walmarts in poor neighborhoods, but Walmart can break down, and actually it's been doing that in Mexico, into smaller stores. So you have the benefit of the convenience and the reach, and also smaller packaging. But at the same time, they offer you that they have all this business intelligence so they can get to you in a cheaper manner. So we have a great case study in Venezuela, which is Dia Dia by a Harvard Business School graduate. And basically the idea is this 400 square meter store that gets into poor neighborhoods. So they offer the convenience. They negotiated different packaging so that it's smaller, so that people can buy smaller volumes. But at the same time, they have this huge business intelligence, these great distribution centers that take advantage of that. So I talked to him yesterday as I preparing this, and he told me, well, I'm sad that everywhere I open, I know 10 small stores close. But at the same time, I know that I can sell cheaper than what they sell, because I know myself I'm more efficient, I have a distribution manager, I have a logistic manager. So he has this type of specializations that these small stores are lacking. So the other idea, which is the idea of training retailers to be business owners and at some point getting in contact with the community and universities. And it's like trying to teach this guy the unteachable. Like we're trying to have this business store guy to be like the store guy, the inventory, the cashier, and even go to the university, relate, leader community, people have a problem, come to me. And what we do know at CID is that when the lower the development of the society, the more things that one person has to do. So, I mean, you cannot have this corporate social responsibility manager at the store. You can have that at Pemex, but Pemex is huge, so they have this guy among thousands that does that. So I will invite you, I work at a brewery when, like porn stars say, when I was young and I badly needed the money. I work at a brewery in Venezuela, and we didn't go to the length that the Catalina program goes, but we did help the small stores with fridge. We helped them paint the whole thing to keep it nice. We have a great distribution network, but in the end, I remember those were the guys we sold more expensive to, because their orders were small, their negotiating power was minimal. And we told them, we have to come here to sell you. But the truth is that we go there to sell him, and the next corner another one. So we did have a good distribution system. But in the end, we helped him to survive so that we can keep on selling to him. So I cannot relate my experience to other countries' experience. But I do remember this very well. And I just wanted to invite the winners to think about this. Larry Summers said yesterday one sentence that I kept. Well, he said many. It's not that he was short on ideas, but related to this. Small is beautiful, but big is potent. And potent is often associated to sustainable. So I also want to invite the winners to think about this idea. Are we helping these people to transcend? Are we helping them to survive while the economy grows and their business model becomes totally unsustainable? Are we making them more secure for a financial standpoint? And if we are not, how can we possibly do that? And that's it. Thank you very much.